Welcome to another episode of Yoke Fellows, where iron sharpens iron. I'm Brendan South.
And I'm Nick Tanner.
Last week we had a episode on a book review of a book we've both read on called "The Right Fight: How to Live a Loving Life" by Kenny, also known as John Kennedy Vaughn. Really enjoyed that one, reflecting on that, and we are happy to announce that we plan to have him on Yoke Fellows in the coming weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. Such a blessing. Somebody that can have such a different perspective and can just really give somebody a paradigm shift. To have somebody of his caliber, we're super excited about that.
This week, we're going to talk about leading our opposition. So sometimes we're in a leadership position, whether we're parents. I'm sure you can relate a whole lot more than I could, Nick, of perhaps having times where you have kids that are opposing you, and being able to handle those situations, or maybe it's in management and having employees perhaps, or in church, whatever the situation is. But you're the one in charge, and the ones following you may not be bought into what you have.
Yeah, so many times I think that we try to make us the message, but we got to remember that we are just the messenger. Certainly, it's humbling in so many perspectives, especially parenting. I'm blessed to have great kids. Okay, but for me to expect them to always see eye to eye with me or to be on the same page as me is just unrealistic. But I think it's a way of the God helping us to grow, to understand, and to see things from somebody else's perspective instead of just our own, which is a great segue into today, I think.
And for today's verse, we have Psalms 37:12 through 15, and it says, "The wicked plots against the righteous and gnashes at him with his teeth. The Lord laughs at him, for he sees his day is coming. The wicked have drawn the sword and bent their bow to cast down the afflicted and the needy, to slay those who are upright in conduct. Their sword will enter their own heart, and their bows will be broken." So with that, we're going to talk about, to start with this, about leading our opposition. We're going to talk about John Maxwell's approach and what it's called the law of the buy-in. And I'm a little less versed in this than I think Nick is. So Nick, you want to share a summary of what that is?
Sure, absolutely. So, I got to start back at the beginning here. This book is called The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And I read this when I was 21 years old. This book was promoted to me properly. Ironically, the person that promoted it to me, they had earned my buy-in. I bought into their leadership, but ultimately, the leadership is just influence. And as leaders, as Christians, as parents, we want to influence people in a positive way. And that influence begins with buy-in, that we need to, I hate to use the word sell ourselves, but I think that maybe reveal ourselves, or to be worthy of them to follow. And to go back to what I said a minute ago about the message versus the messenger, it certainly does help when we are not the message, but I'm the messenger of Jesus Christ. This is what he's done in my life, and he should be able to influence you in this positive direction also. But you had written down a couple of ideas here that I have also underlined in my own book. I'll let you do that first thought there. But to ask yourself, before you're leading somebody to something in a positive direction, to ask, have I given this person a reason to buy into me? And I think that one thing that the Bible certainly teaches us and promotes is that we are humble. Humility is something that people see as real. If we are haughty, if we are cocky, if we're like that, people are less apt to follow us, as referred to as if you can say, I'm just simply a sinner saved by grace. I'm pointing you to this. I'm following in the direction of Jesus Christ, and I'm going to try to influence you to do the same thing.
Some of the notes that I got was from a summary online, so I don't have the author of the summary, but these ideas come from John Maxwell, and one of those things was that people follow the person. You do not have to follow a great cause first. You follow a leader you trust and believe in, and you talked about this being hey, I'm a follower of Jesus, and I want to point people to Jesus, and that's what matters. And I think that when we think of leadership, so I'm not going to use this necessarily as we may define leadership, but we can define it as like a relationship of, one instance is starting this podcast together. I mention it, you're all in for it, and we go in all in together, and to do this, and so we're following each other in this as a team, and that's so important. And I think the biggest thing of how this continues, or how other people start something together, is that we have the same cause together. It says here that the great cause doesn't have to come first, but there has to be a great reason, a great relationship, a great common goal. Common goal may start with wanting to share Jesus to others, and then going from there. There wasn't. When I reflect on that, there wasn't much time in being all in for that, and just God working in that. But you have to be able to believe in somebody and to trust them, and it can say a lot of the person believing in somebody else and trusting somebody else, whether they know them for 30 minutes or they know them for years.
That's right. Yeah, a track record certainly helps. When we had first talked about doing this, I think you had brought up that you had done these podcasts before. I thought that's great. We had a great conversation, great dinner, and realized that we aligned on so many things spiritually, as well as our long-term vision of what we want to do. We want to glorify God. That's what the big part of the purpose is here, and to help to influence and to inform, and to kind of let people know that same thing. John Maxwell mentions in this chapter that once an entrepreneur succeeds at a business, he doesn't have trouble funding his next venture, ultimately because people have bought into what he is doing. They see, okay, you know what you're doing, you've already proved it, therefore let's do this, right? We don't want to follow somebody that we don't trust or that we haven't bought into entirely here. I can't resist this. This story always stuck with me. If you're going through a minefield, you want to follow somebody that made it to the other side and has all of their limbs, right? And the joke is you don't want to follow Stumpy across, right? He can say that he knows it, but the results don't necessarily match up. And if I want to get the same thing that you've got, I can follow in the same direction here. And so that's where that idea of influence, and that in order to influence people to follow you, that you will have some of those results, as well as that they will know you and they will know that you have their best interest in mind, that you're not going to lead them partway and then abandon them there, right? That you have that, and that's where Jesus comes in very nicely, because that is what you can see the life that Jesus lived, the path that he took, what he did, how he treated people. We were talking in our Bible study before this about a little bit about how God sees us, having that this is a child of God lens, instead of this person might take a shot at my ego, right? Or I might not be able to get along with them very well. But if instead you're seeing this person as a child of God and you want what's best for them, we'll be able to tell that. They will be able to tell, and they will buy in or not buy in, kind of based on that thought of how they see you seeing them. So that God lens of this is a child of God and I want what's best for them, that certainly helps with leading your opposition.
You talked about not following a guy with a pegged leg, seeming like they have a history of failures.
Yeah.
One of the points here too is like the next part about the vision is filtered. Every goal or plan is judged through the character of the leader who shares it, showing that leader us showing integrity, being constant, and being true, and all that we're doing and following Jesus, and the goals that we're setting together, and that our plans sometimes. The other thing I think about this too, way, is even with here, I can stammer and struggle to explain something, and we can lose people in our train of thought. And that is the same way with leadership. When we're trying to convey a vision that we have to be able to do it clearly. It doesn't need to be perfect, but it needs to be to say, hey, that person that is displaying this vision is bought in, really wants to become this way. I'm going to follow them because they're all in on it too. And we have to be willing to convey it in such a way that, like, here's my conviction. I'm all in with you guys. I'm not just having a vision that you all have to do the work, but I'm here with you in it and playing an important role.
Yeah, Maxwell talks a lot about that we are more likely to work with somebody that's right there with us instead of telling us what to do. That whole saying of I'm too busy seeing what you're doing to hear what you're saying. That example is so huge. I know at Christmas time he would go down and help to package all the books or whatever was being sold through the company. He would get right down there with people and serve right along with them. He wasn't in his ivory tower commanding and telling everybody what to do. And people knew that, and they saw that, and they were more likely to continue to work with him. And it was also a great opportunity to get to know. One thing, people that leaders in this aspect are really good communicators. Sometimes that is difficult. I mean, communication, it's called a skill for a reason, because you have to develop a little bit of that, and you can get better at it to get your point across. But ultimately, another thing he says here, that every message people receive is filtered through the messenger who delivers it, right? So that is another example of why communication is so key in this. It's so easy for people to get the wrong idea, and anytime we come into something, we might have an idea of or an expectation that's a little different than the reality of it. And it's so important that people know us too. That helps so much to say, okay, I know who they are, and I know that they really do have my best interest at heart here, right? They're not going to be second guessing that. This Speed of Trust is a book by I think it was Stephen Covey, talking about if you trust the person, then you know their intent, and you are going to buy in with them, and you're more apt to go alongside and do, because you know who the person is. You know they've got your best, what's best for you, your best interest. And so that they're less likely to pause and stop and say, okay, are they going to try to do something that I don't expect them to here? Right? The more you're on the same page with that, I mean, I'm going to say yoked with, the more likely they are to follow you too. But of course, we've got to see this through who we have decided to follow and why, and who we have not decided to follow and why. And whether that's right or wrong, accurate or inaccurate, is up for debate in these different situations. But to really say, yeah, why do I follow this person? And what do I have against this person? Because sometimes, there can be any number of reasons why we don't follow somebody. But sometimes we have misinterpreted something that they do, and so we just don't quite trust them. But that's why it's so important, this communication and this buy-in to because we are the messenger, and that's what they're going to run this through.
Another part of that, I think that goes along with what you were talking about, is that credibility changes everything. Mm-hmm. People doubt you, they will doubt your dream. If they respect you, they will help you reach the goal, even when it is hard. And I think that back in ministry experiences, when I think of this, I wanted to have a Bible study for adults, not necessarily a Bible study, but a book study. And it was a book by John Maxwell. And I wanted to have a study and invite adults, and the church knew about it, announced it, and no one showed up.
Oh.
And so it was a realization there, and I don't know, can't say that for certain that it was this reason, but this point brings that to mind. Did they doubt me? Did they doubt my dream? Did they respect me? And I think that one of those reflecting on that, I'm sure youth had a lot to do with it. Being young and saying, hey, I want to teach you about leadership. And so there's a lot of doubt there. I don't have a lot of credibility of a long-term relation or leadership, and that's another part of that. When another reflection of that about leadership and people having confidence in what I teach and stuff. I remember a pastor telling me, "Hey, that sermon that you preached about telling the church how to welcome a new pastor, how not to say, hey, this old pastor did it this way, and we didn't like this," or to talk bad about the old pastor, and to tell the church how to treat the new pastor. Well, that may not have been received well because they look at me as being young, fresh out of college, and no credibility there. Even though I had the degree, I had the commentaries and the advice from seasoned pastors and things of what to say. They may not take it as well. So the credibility changes everything of how effective you are, of people following you and being able to have that respect, to have them follow you in their goals.
Yeah, merits, I think, is kind of a little bit of what you're might be alluding to there. I think everybody's been in that situation at some time. To realize why something didn't work out, and that could have been any reason. To the day was bad, or the people already had things going on. But yeah, there's certainly that. You've got to let somebody know who you are first, right? If people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. But once you've got that relationship, then they would even show up to support that kind of a thing. But yeah, without that, the credibility as a young person, you kind of have to show them the value of it, I suppose, on the one aspect of things, right? If somebody's going to buy in and follow what you've got going on, you need to let them know the value of it, but then you also have to deliver too. I can almost picture that, and knowing how prepared you are and everything like that, I can almost imagine that you had a home run. But if nobody was there to enjoy it, Maxwell also has this saying that if you think you're a leader but nobody's following you, you're just out for a walk. And I remember reading that as a young man, a 21-year-old, sitting by the pool reading this up in Michigan, and thinking, ouch, that's right, I'm just out for a walk. Nobody's following me yet. I had to develop these relationships. I had to invest the time and to realize how valuable that was. I'm going to get a little off track here, but I'll bring it back around. It's going to be worth it. There's a couple kinds of people. There are people that are task-oriented, and there are people that are relationally oriented. And as a young, as a 21-year-old, I was extremely task-oriented. I didn't care about the relationship, right? I could get the job done, but there'd be a lot of hurt feelings and tears and Kleenex behind me. But I was going to get the job done. But it's amazing how much more you can get done if there are people with you doing it. But then I came to realize later on, the task is relationship. Relationship is the task. It's all intertwined. And if you can get that relationship part, then I began to focus on that while I'm still task-oriented. But to realize how valuable people are. And they can feel that. They can feel if you're just telling them what they want to hear, using you. We'll figure that out. And I feel like a lot of people listening to this may have been in a situation like that too, where I bought into somebody, but they sold me, and that was not the right thing. And then I realized it later on, and that poor person, well, I shouldn't say poor person, but that person has to continually go around and influence and get more people to buy in because they're not backing up what they're saying, right? To put their money where their mouth is, so to speak. That's key too. You've got to be who you say you are. It's got to match. The walk has to match with the talk at the same time, and that's so vital. But being able to get that relationship, I have had to go back and backtrack because I was task oriented. I wanted to get the job done, but then I had to go back and let people know that I really genuinely did care about them, and that I would make an adjustment because I cared for them with whatever project we were working on, so that they would buy into the vision, to the message, not the messenger.
Yeah, and I think it goes well with this next part of the summary is that you cannot separate them. The leader and the cause, they always go together as a single package.
Yeah.
I remember being in situations where I wasn't totally bought in what I was asked to do, and I had to try to sell it. I knew I had to buy into it and what I was going to present. And I'm not one to hide much from what I say or how I look. Something can tell a story if I'm not bought into it, and to keep it vague. But it was very hard to sell such things. But real world situations, though, I think that if and this is being hypocritical, but sometimes we as parents can say, hey, you can't listen to this song. Hey, you can't listen to this. How bought in are you totally into that if you're listening to the songs or you're listening to those videos, those movies? And yes, there's some fine lines there of what's chosen, but in those situations, though, how bought in are we and teaching somebody to do something right or to go the right direction, but we're not really going the right direction. What we're saying, we're not really meaning because we kind of don't care. We've just been told to pass the message. So we have to learn to make it that single package of how we lead. And if we're really not bought in what we're leading, then we shouldn't be leading that situation.
That's right. Yeah, the first buy-in and influence is yourself. It's hard to say something that you don't believe in, speaking from experience.
And sometimes it's eating crow.
Absolutely, absolutely. But that's it can be it's attractive to some people. Sometimes we just need. Well, John Maxwell in his book here says, "I need to buy some time to build my credibility with people," and that's I would argue that is an investment. That you need to take that time. Not only that, but you need to get to know somebody so that you can see the world through their eyes, right? So many times you were talking about maybe a parent telling you not to do something that they're doing, and I mean that's tough. I think that any of us can relate to that maybe better than us trying to help somebody else through something, to guide them through something, and to have that grace too, to know that we're going to make mistakes and they're going to make mistakes, that there's not perfection. What matters is that it's the journey of where we're going. We've got to keep our eyes on the prize, but it's that journey is so vital, and who's along on that journey with you, instead of trying to feel morally superior to everybody else, to realize, to eat crow, like you said, to realize that we're going to be learning along the lines here too. I know there's a book called The Next Generation Leader by Andy Stanley. It talks about that a leader sometimes is going to be leading people somewhere that they have never been, and that we've got to understand that there's going to be some missteps along the way. But that's so important. If you do buy in and you want what's best for whoever you're following, that you need to speak up and say, hey, I think that it would be better to do this. Now ultimately we may not have the final say or the choice of what gets done there, but we need to also communicate on that end as well. But so important to be able to see things from other people's perspective. The Native American saying, don't judge a man until you've walked a mile in his moccasins. Important to understand before we start leading or ordering people or telling them around is so important. I had underlined another spot in the book here. I shared my ideas, hopes, and dreams for the work that we were doing. I started to produce growth in the organization, and that more than anything else gave the people confidence in me and my ability. So in other words, as we're going to continue to improve, and that ties back to the podcast we did just a couple of weeks ago there too. So important that along the same lines.
So, some of the things we talk about in the leadership topics of things, whether on this podcast or we go to a course on leadership, we read a John Maxwell book, self-help books out there. It's going to, maybe we go into it and we think it's going to fix it all. It gives us all the steps to take. It tells us what to do. It tells us how to be most effective. Well, let's just be real here. Sometimes people won't buy in knowing you personally based on the things like your
Yeah.
beliefs. They could not buy in on you because you're a Christian, because they know that you're a Democrat or that you're a Republican or whatever it may be. You may be the most righteous person on earth, and you're probably just self-righteous then, but doing the most perfect, the best you're doing in your Christian walk, and somebody may not follow you for that reason. And that's a difficult place to be in when, yes, you have differences, but the other person is just like, okay, because you believe these things, I'm not buying what you're selling, even though it may really not be what your beliefs are. It's just the same goal. Maybe it's the goal. Somebody out there is working at a car wash, and they have a teammate, and get promoted to supervisor. They know you're a Christian. I'm not going to, cooperate with this guy. But your goal is just to wash vehicles. But because they know what you believe, they don't want to follow you. So what do you do if no one buys in? And my first thought of that is just most people can't sell to resistant buyers the first time. So don't give up.
Yeah. Yeah, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Yeah, we have to understand for sure. Well, first of all, that's pretty humbling. That's humility when you realize that no matter what, this person just isn't going to follow you because of this reason or because of that reason. And we've got to accept that. And I think that's another way to lean on God, to have faith that if your point is just, if it's righteous means, a righteous thing, then God will bring the right people alongside. I believe that God honors consistency. And as long as we are firmly doing the right thing to glorify Him too, then to realize, okay, well, this isn't for you, right? Not everybody's going to do everything. God made us all different, and we can all learn from something like that. But, to have the right people on the bus, now I think I'm referring to Jim Collins, his book, Good to Great. But so important to have the right people in the right spots on your bus. I could be getting that confused with John Maxwell. My apologies to both of you guys if you're listening.
They probably steal each other's ideas anyway. So.
That's right. That's right. They most likely have referenced each other there. So, but yeah, we each have also, we have to consider this too, that sometimes we are doing the right things and we're doing it for the right reasons, but maybe somebody is in the wrong place. Maybe this isn't going to be long-term what they want to do. And it's important to realize and remember that not everybody is going to buy into you. And that's okay, because there are other people that will, and it doesn't mean I think that's an opportunity for us to grow. When somebody disagrees with us or we're finding it challenging, they're not going to follow us. Like, okay, we need to give them the grace. We need to see how things look from their point of view. That can reveal some blind spots that we might have too. And that could help us in the future to help to communicate with somebody else better, to help to see it from their point of view, to see what life looks like from where they're standing, from their eyeballs. And that'll help us ultimately become more relatable, and then maybe we can become a better leader long term because of that.
And facing different types of opposition that I've went through, because sometimes the leader or the follower or the employee or the child, I don't think it always has to be somebody who does it in an angry way of being resistant, being hateful or being rude. Sometimes it's just somebody that's you have your A players, B, maybe they're an F player. They flunk at it. They're just awful at it,
Yeah.
and they just like get by with their part. And people that are not willing to hear someone out has to make a choice, to either join in on what we might be leading, or they need to make the choice to step away from the team or the goal. And maybe there's someone on here isn't a leader and they're trying to be a follower. Do you really want to follow that person? Or if you're not bought in with what they're leading, do you need to find another place? Do you need to step away? Or do you need to step away from maybe the goal as a part of the team? And as you said, being in the right position. Am I in the right position? If I was in a different one, would I be bought into this cause? But we can't allow people like that, if we're the leader facing situations, allow their choice to not buy in and how we treat them. it can be very frustrating. I've went through things that it can be very frustrating, and sometimes, as you said, it can be frustrating that nobody comes to the book study, that you start, or to the ministry event that you schedule, or being difficult, and it can be frustrating within the work field, or just even with a family member. And the thing that I'm reminded with this in Titus 2:7-8, it says, "In all things, show yourself to be an example of good deeds, with purity in doctrine, dignified, sound in speech, which is beyond reproach, so that the opponent will be put to shame, having nothing bad to say about us." They can have bad things to say about us, but when we are doing what we are called and following Jesus, hey, God's our ultimate judge, and if we can stand before him and say, I did the best I could to follow Jesus, and knowing we're still not perfect, but being able to say, I follow Jesus, and I plead his blood. I want to follow him and accept the payment that he gave that I don't deserve, and that's the only reason why I'm here. But that's who our ultimate judge is, and if God is our judge, because sometimes we can use this to say only God can judge me, but we better live the way that we believe, and know that he is the one that's going to judge us.
Yeah, that's exactly right. To look at this through, the life of Jesus is, of course, always powerful, but to realize that some people didn't want to have anything to do with him. We have the choice of what we do there. But he had message to the multitudes, but he just chose his 12. He really invested in having these strong relationships with just a few people. It's kind of like it's for who it's for. And ultimately, we can't have these tight relationships and a lot of buy-in with massive amounts of people and for everybody to truly know you that well. So the best thing I think we can do is to really invest in just a few people to have that solid foundation around us, that buy-in, and then they will be able to influence people as well. If we're going to have a larger movement, right? If you want to, I just said this earlier, if you want to get there fast, go by yourself. If you want to go far, go together. Have more people working all together instead. And another hang up here I wanted to bring up, it's that you don't have to get the credit for being right. Right? We've all heard that saying of, I won the battle, but I lost the war. There's no room for ego with this either. We need to make sure that we are being humble and admitting when we're wrong, but at the same time that we don't always have to be right or be arguing about something. Sometimes somebody else's idea is better, and we need to have that be the ultimate purpose of it instead. But yeah, not everybody followed Jesus, and he didn't invest deeply in everybody like he did those 3 years of his life and his disciples and his apostles. That is so key right there, to not take on too much, but to really have a tight relationship with just a few key people and to have your sights on the right thing. That's where if I can be great friends with somebody that doesn't have the same purpose in their life or the same ultimate goal, and that's fine. They don't have to buy in on this, right? But we've got to have enough people that we have bought into that influence and leadership that we can influence them in a positive direction.
When I think on being on the other end of having leadership over me and sometimes opposing them, but also feeling like, they oppose me, a situation where, I was young in the position, and the leadership over me was, wanted me to know that they were in charge, and I didn't feel like they respect my position on the team, and I felt even belittled and how they addressed some of the issues that they addressed. And it was a hard situation, and I think that person wanted me to know that they were in charge, that I was not the one in charge, and tried to handle it the best way I could. But I remember when, because this was a short-term situation of just for a summer, and after it was all said and done, I remember telling them, hey, I wish we had this relationship from the start. Mm-hmm. And when I look back at that, I don't know if the relationship got better because we knew that the finish line was there, and that we had a good relationship um, outside of a over me and under them type of situation, and that it was back to being uh, friends and not being above or below each other in position. And so I don't know exactly what went on there, but I'm sure that was a little bit of it, of relief, and not having to address the conflict. But that's kind of sad too. That we have to grow in how we lead and how we follow to be able to grow and address situations. That's not just, oh, I'm so glad that's over. Sometimes, we can be thankful for those, but we have to be willing to address them so that we have a better working relationship and what we're working towards.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, when you are yoked with somebody, that is key. That is absolutely vital. I think it's a balance of making yourself a little bit vulnerable, and then to take your eyes off of yourself, to love your neighbor as yourself, to use somebody else's words here, but to truly do that and to have genuinely what's best for them. We hear stories of salesmen that are coming just to close the sale and maybe rip somebody off, but they will know if they did something wrong, and I think the people can kind of sniff that out. But when you do make yourself vulnerable and you are willing to admit, like, okay, this is not totally as it appears, I need to be honest with you, even though it's going to cost me something, boy, that really contributes to, if you have a relational bank account with somebody, that's a big deposit. Somebody does that with me, and I can really know, okay, this person genuinely is who they say they are. They really do care about me. They're not just using me as a pawn in some game. But that is so vital to have that trust, that relationship with people that we are yoked with. So did you want to use a couple of yoke fellow examples I see you've got on here?
Yeah. So I think that just to also address that sometimes, because I know that I've been through this list at times of feeling opposed and trying to do my best, even though feels imperfect, and it can be very discouraging, draining. A lot of things. Just to be real, for people who probably going through this is, depression, anxiety, loss of sleep, just not doing well, and we can all be there, and we need to be able to have people to not be alone in how we're addressing things, whether it's opposition from a person or the trials in opposition, feeling like everything's coming at us. So when we look at the Bible, we can see that Timothy needed Paul, Moses needed Aaron, and David needed help from Jonathan, leading people with some sort of opposition. We're guaranteed to have opposition, and we need to have godly support if we are to overcome it.
That's right. And with that, I'll close us in prayer. Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for opportunities to see the world from a different perspective than just our own. Lord, thank you for broadening our horizons. I pray that our listeners have a better understanding of how to show other people who they genuinely are, to have righteous motives. And I pray that you can continue to help us to lead our opposition to the truth, which is to your Son, Jesus. Father, I thank you for influence that we have. I pray that we continue to do so to your glory and to your honor. I thank you for humility, that we can genuinely be ourselves with other people. And I pray that you help us to break down those walls that separate us from one another, to help us genuinely fellowship as you intended us to. And thank you for relationships, Lord. All this we pray in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.